Introducing Nose to Tail, a podcast where we explore the world of aviation lifecycle solutions, insights, and more. Presented by Jet Midwest.
Welcome back to the Nose to Tail podcast. We appreciate all of our listeners. I'm here with Richard Woolley. Richard's been a longtime friend, and we've worked with him quite a bit in the aviation business. How you doing, Richard?
Great. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's kind of nice in front of the microphones instead of sitting in our offices. Maybe you can give the folks out there maybe a flavor of what you've done in your professional career and maybe how that led you to aviation.
Certainly, Patrick. So I started off my career as a mechanical engineer. First job, it was at the Boeing company up in north of Seattle. Worked in Everett, lived in Mukilteo. If you know where Mukilteo is, that's great. I worked in the jet propulsion labs in the Everett building. So I worked on calculating thrust coefficients for the GE engines, and then I worked on the simulator for the RB211. This was prior to the 747-400 being certified.
Was this the 74300?
It was for the 747-400.
Okay.
So I did flight testing on that airplane, collecting simulator data, and checking the my model compared to the actual airplane and adjusting it, working with the rules folks in Darby, and it was great.
So we got an engineering degree.
Mechanical engineering from Brigham Young University.
Right, it's a BYU guy. I won't hold that against you. You beat my cats earlier this year. So did you have an interest in aviation at that point? Or were you going to go work for NASA?
I was actually really interested in the jet propulsion world. At the gas dynamics class I had in engineering and all the thermodynamics, I was fascinated by it. And that really kind of got me into it. So
it must be why we're such good friends, because I'm full of hot gas and
exactly.
Very interesting.
Hot air, exactly.
So you worked with the 524 engine on that project with Boeing. What was the next evolution in your career?
Next evolution was I went back to school. I went back to school and got a master's in business administration at BYU. Great program. And out of school there, I was offered a job to go back to Boeing, but I took a job to work at a little small aerospace machining company in Provo, Utah, called Avtech Systems. And I was a program manager there. We did all sorts of aerospace machining, big CNC lathes. We took on programs. We did a big program with the Navy. Worked on the MLRS systems. We worked on lots of different programs.
Yeah, Richard, sometimes in aviation, we forget that we have these acronyms that we use, and some of our folks out there don't have a clue what an MRLS program.
Mobile Launch Rocket System, parts for it. So that's kind of what then we were purchased by another company, Teleflex Defense Systems. I worked there for a while. Then I had a big change in my career. So I got into the hunting bullet industry.
Interesting.
So I worked for a little company called Barnes Bullets, the general manager there. It was very interesting. I had not done a lot of hunting in my life, but I had done some design work, and I got into helping redesign their bullets so they would shoot straighter, farther, faster. Learned all about the design. I ended up buying a missile design package to be able to help redesign these bullets, and it was a great experience.
And is that a little overkill when you're using missile design to knock out the local deer?
No, it's a little missile.
That's true.
And
it is helped that it shoots straight and it's powerful, right? It's a job to do. So where did you go from there?
I started working I worked for a number of years at a company called Circ Corporation in Salt Lake City. And basically, founder of Circ was essentially the creator of capacitive touch input technology, things that you'll use on your laptop today, your little gray touchpad mouse. It had served multiple roles there. But as a manager, as an engineering manager over sales, I worked with large companies like Dell and HP and Lenovo. And
so all of those touchpads on all of our laptops originated with you, is what you're saying?
Actually, the technology did. We did get a competitor, formidable competitor. So we're not the only ones out in the marketplace.
All right. So obviously you've got a lot. You probably had family and things. You're there in the Salt Lake region, and that's probably why you stayed in that area. Now, what's your exposure? You and I are really, when I was introduced to you, we were really working on aircraft, right? So you were managing a leasing portfolio of some assets. But talk to me a little bit about how you got into that side of the house and maybe what excites you about that part of the business.
I had the opportunity, Ken Woolley, my older brother, he contacted me and asked if I would become the CEO president of this little company called Alta Airlines Holdings. And it was an opportunity to get back into the aerospace industry from a very different perspective, not designing, not testing, but more of buying, selling, evaluating assets, working with new people such as Jet Midwest and becoming partners with Jet Midwest. So that's kind of where we came together.
They're obviously going from maybe engineering design side into maybe using more of your business degree. Talk to me about, what do you really like there? What drives you, your passion each day, or maybe what drives it differently than it did when you were in the engineering side?
It's a good question, Patrick, because it's kind of like a kid being back into a candy store who hadn't been there for a while. It's a different candy store than the computer technology world, which is a lot of fun, or the bullet world. It's also kind of a very fascinating world. When you're walking underneath an airplane, it's just a magnificent creation, an engineering creation. It just is. And the whole concept of buying this airplane and getting these engines and putting together and making a whole good airplane is just, I don't know how to say it. It's just cool. And to be able to resurrect an airplane that's been in the desert, it needs a little love, needs a little care, and you can bring this asset back to life. That's kind of it's a cool thing to be able to do. And that's what we do. Or we evaluate, as you know, this airplane is not going to come back to life. What can we do with it?
It certainly is. It's actually, you point out, just even walking under the airplane. I was giving a tour to a prospective employee, and she had really only been exposed to the business jet side of the house and smaller aircraft. And so I took her into the hangar, and there's a 757 and there's 777, and she's just, eyes were really big. And sometimes I forget how blessed we are that we get to actually go and experience that anytime we want. They can walk downstairs and experience those things. And most of the people in the public don't get that opportunity. So it is pretty fascinating. And, I'm almost in the reverse. Like I have this huge passion for airplanes, and it's the business I've been in. I'm in awe of the engineering that you've done and really what's been going into these airplanes. Like, to me, it's amazing that you can take a 747-8. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, it's just short of 1 million pounds max takeoff weight. So that's full of people and cargo and the plastic and the aluminum, the fuel and all these other things. And it flies, 700 miles an hour for 20 hours, and they get off and everybody unloads. And a couple hours later, much more people get on and they turn around and do it again. And it's amazing. 1 million pounds. It's a staggering thing that originated on a slide rule in 60s as they were designing the 747-100 originally. Right, it's the same iteration, just growing and evolving as the engineering improves. So I'm pretty awestruck of that side of the house. That is for sure.
Just the engines alone. So when I was at Boeing on the RB211-524, we were hitting 60,000 pounds of thrust. Right, that was fantastic. Back in the 1940s and World War II, you had Rolls-Royce creating engines that had 1,000 pounds thrust, and then a 2,000, and then a 4,000, and then went up to 5,000 pounds. Wow. Well, then, so back, 1980s, it hit 60,000 pounds. Now we're hitting 90,000 pounds. Not we, but the engines are. It's fascinating. These engine cows are what? How big is the GE90 engine?
Well, it's a 115-inch fan. So the cowling is another couple of feet larger than that. So it's 130 inches roughly for just the inlet cowl. And but the engineers recognized that they had a commercial problem with that, right? So they actually take that engine cowl and they split it into two pieces and designed it to be split so that it actually could go as freight. It'd actually make it through the door. I have some doors in my building, in my warehouse, that are too small. They cannot take it into the building because it's too big, and they actually have to split it in half to bring it in the regular building. Honestly, a lot of the times when we bring those in, we actually take them into the hangar because the hangar's plenty big. But again, the engineers knew that they had to have a design that could be commercially reasonable. And even with the GE90 engine design, it has a fan section on the front, which comes apart as part of the normal course maintenance. And you have a fan section, and the back end is the bolster section. And they've designed those so that they can come apart because they're just simply too big to ship somewhere because they're just so big, which again is pretty awesome. If you think about design, they really understood the obstacles that they were creating by making these engines that much bigger.
And the airplanes, because back at the Everett plant of Boeing, it was I think it still is, world's largest building by volume. Huge, just monstrous things. And as a young engineer going in there, it's just like, you just look all around. It's just fascinating. It just is. It's fascinating. It's a fun thing. Anyway.
Well, certainly Boeing charges an awful lot of money for a lot of these things, but they do take a lot of risk in trying to create these great technologies and create these flying experiences, honestly, that are pretty spectacular. I mean, if you think about, I absolutely love, been on the 787 a handful of times in my career. Man, it's a smooth flight, and it's just a fantastic cabin experience and such a smooth flights every time. And maybe I just gotten lucky and I need to knock on some wood. Next time I get on a 787, it's not a bumpy ride, but they've done some really great things with the aircraft. So you've talked a little bit about engines and a little bit about the airplanes. Usually when I have guests, I have people that we talk to in the business, they trend to have a passion towards one more than the other. In fact, a lot of my engine folks are in the engine industry. They never get out. They just stay there. They just love it so much. So is there one side of that excites you more?
Maybe the engine's a little bit more, but as I said, in engineering school, we studied, gas dynamics, and you're dealing with the airflow over the wings and how that works and the lift and that type of concept. So again, when you walk into a hangar and you look at these airplanes, they're massive and these wings are just way out there. They're flying fuel tanks, right?
Right.
And there's so much engineering involved with it. It's also still a very fascinating thing. Back in the day on the 747 was the first big Boeing jet to have winglets. You had what I think they're 6 feet tall winglets. They might be taller. I like both, but engines are a little more exciting.
That's fair. I'm kind of an airframe guy. I've been on the airframe side most of my career and relied on other people. So, just even speaking about cargo conversions, I know that you guys have been working on 777 cargo conversion. Maybe you can give the listeners a little flavor of how that project, where it is today, and maybe what that looks like.
So there's multiple types of conversions one can do. This conversion is for a 777-200ER or a 200 system. It's a Class E cargo system, meaning it doesn't have fire extinguishers in it, but it is fire resistant or whatever, and it passes that type of a criteria. In fact, we're at to the point now we're doing fire testing on the airplane to make smoke testing. You have to create smoke in the fuselage. You got to be able to detect that smoke within a minute through many stations throughout the airplane. This particular conversion, this first one, we call it STC1, is a hand carry. You have to hand load the product on the airplane, but there's a lot of volume in that airplane. So it's a low cost conversion. It does require you to hand load. It has individual ING nets to hold down your cargo. And it's designed for quick conversion, low cost conversion, and it's still quite efficient as an airplane. The 777 airplane's a very efficient airplane. It can go long distances and it can carry a lot of cargo.
How does the upper deck cargo capacity look like on that aircraft compared to maybe a 767-300, which is a very popular cargo aircraft right now?
Volume wise, I don't know in terms of a factor, but I do know the volumes. It's just a lot bigger. In terms of the answer, it's just a lot bigger.
Fair enough. Yep. I did know that we had, during COVID, there were discussions about flying a lot of aircraft as platers, right? Taking out seats and putting cargo in the main cabin. In the discussions on the 777-200ERs was that the belly cargo system held as much as an upper deck of a 757 freighter, which is pretty magnificent. Of course, I might have gotten that wrong. It's been about 3 years since I've heard that, but that's what stuck in my head. So we'll call that close enough right now. But that's certainly huge for anybody who needed to carry cargo at the time, right? Because we needed additional lift because all of the passenger aircraft were staying on the ground and not flying passengers. And we've lost all those cargo bellies that were flying things that weren't bags.
Well, what we're finding, Patrick, is that the e-commerce world continues just to blossom. We're demanding more stuff. We want it fast. We want it quick. There's all sorts of suppliers. We think of Amazon, great supplier, but there's other suppliers as well. There's a lot of cargo trying to get from point A to point B, and you need to have airplanes to haul it around.
We'll continue this discussion on the next episode of Nose to Tail, a podcast presented by Jet Midwest. Don't forget to please like and subscribe to our channel.